I'm Abby Meller, Managing Director of Moreover. I'm the host of Leading Lights, the podcast for women in the charity sector. Today my guest is April Baker, Chief Executive of Together Co. Together Co have been creating connections in the Brighton and Hove community for over 25 years with the help of hundreds of volunteers. It does this through its befriending and social prescribing services, which support thousands of people across the city. Hi April.
Hello, nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too. April, we're going to start by thinking about what's your earliest significant memory?
It's really interesting, that question, when you kind of get asked that, because I kind of want to close my eyes and go, right, what is it? And the thing that always comes up for me is, so I grew up in Bicester near Oxford, and we had a Victorian house where all the gardens interconnected. And so with about 4 years old with my little bicycle, I'm an only child, I should add to this as well. So I was like trying to go and find friends. I would cycle up and down all the people's gardens and just go in and see people. That's quite a significant memory because I'd often go into people living on their own, and I'd go and have a cup of tea, and I'd, you know, kind of come back and say, oh, I saw this person. My mum would be like, well, you shouldn't go in there. But I think that for me was like that early age of kind of, I'm on my own as an only child, and I used to go and visit people on their own. And I loved it, and I always wanted to bring them home with me as well. So I think that for me is, a really significant early memory, and I can picture it right now and those gardens and what each person's garden looked like. And it was amazing.
That's incredible. Why do you think you did it? Why you? Why did you go into those gardens? Why did you want to knock on those doors?
Seeing my mum and dad connecting with our neighbours. So I kind of had that open welcome to kind of reach out. So my parents were very, get to know everyone on your street, open door policy. So I think that was really key. But I do think I've always been interested in human beings that were older people as well. So I didn't grow up with any grandparents around me. My dad's side of the family sadly had passed away, and my mum's were all in Ireland. So I think also with the older person, it was like maybe somehow wanting that grandparent from, the books you read as a little girl, that you'd have like older connection as an only child. That's your way to have a conversation when you don't have brothers and sisters as well. So it was nice to kind of go and do that each day.
Absolutely. And that's that value exchange, isn't it?
Yeah.
That happens when you befriend somebody
Exactly.
who doesn't have company. It's not just that you're giving something to them, you're certainly getting something back too.
Yeah, I could have put it better, because I think that's really right. I think for me, sometimes befriending can seem a little bit unequal, but actually ultimately what it is a friendship and a connection that wouldn't otherwise happen. So I'm actually matched with somebody who lives about 5 streets away from me, has early onset dementia. And we are connected through our love of cats, of books, of travel. And we have the most amazing conversation, even though when I first arrived, they may not fully remember who I am, but after time, we get to know the conversations again, and I get so much from it. To be like, oh, that's so nice, aren't you a good person? No, it's because I know that that's really important for me too. And I have a real kind of buzz afterwards as well. And it takes you away from the day-to-day of emails, strategy planning meetings, board meetings, and just to have a connection with another human being that I otherwise wouldn't have known was 5 streets away is beautiful.
Absolutely. There's something else about the different generations, something that I think in certain parts of the country might have lost, where we are only interacting with people of our own age in the same life stage as well. But when you're cycling up as a 4-year-old, or now when you're matched, I guess you're getting a different perspective, I suppose, on life.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely point to make, actually, because what's really interesting is you're matched based on what you love, what you enjoy doing, what's your passion. And then that strips away anything else that we're often put into boxes about. So our age or our culture, it strips all of that away, and it is just what you love. And the friendships that are formed from that, the stories, I could say loads because it just is so beautiful. Never would have met, but are the best of friends because of that. We need more of that. We need to bring people together, because I think otherwise we all stay in very similar groups. And you kind of see that with social media, with like the echo chamber of what you see. We need to kind of mix that up, be a bit rebellious with that, I think.
We do. We absolutely do. And sort of related to that, I was thinking about who's been the biggest influence in your life?
I don't have one person, I could say. So what I've actually thought about for me is like the biggest influence in my life has been characters in books and autobiographies. And I think they have influenced me through each journey of my life. So characters of books from like Matilda, The Worst Witch, all kind of like young females with like these powers, but really had some difficult life stories as well. I think that really inspired me as a young girl, through to some amazing autobiographies that I get to read. Maya Angelou, absolutely incredible. Her work, her poetry, her life, the lessons we can all learn from her, through to obviously Michelle Obama. But it's just the constant kind of characters and people that have been the influence in my life. And I then am excited to keep having new people that will influence me through my love of reading, which is probably coming across quite the bookworm. But I think that has been who has influenced me the most, and kind of how I shape and see the world.
How do you find time to still read as the chief executive of a charity? You must be so busy, and yet, as you say, it has such an impact on your life.
It's actually an important part of my daily routine because I adore it so much. And also, a book can look very daunting, but actually if you break it down to 200-300 pages and how many pages you could read a day over a month, it's not actually that bad. So what I do as part of my evening routine is phone goes away. It goes into the dining room an hour and a half before I'm going to bed. And then as I get into bed, I sit and read every night. And that is my time. And I don't read loads, depending on how tired I am. To be honest with you, sometimes I may make 2 pages and I'm out for the count. But that is how I've sort of factored that in. I love my holidays. So it's something that's very important to me as a leader, is to give people a good amount of time to go away. So we have really good annual leave, I feel. Could be even better, I've no doubt. But I go away and I take books with me. That's when I kind of read quicker and faster. I also take moments in the day. So for instance, I've travelled up on a train today where I've read a couple of articles because I couldn't log in. My internet wasn't working on the train. So it's kind of a reason about, okay, there's a couple of things I wanted to read. And that's what energises me and inspires me every day. And it takes me away from the busyness of the CEO role.
Yeah, it's that focus on the one thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We talk a lot in our world about all the different distractions and how hard it is to like hone in on one thought at one time and to really take that in. Books do give you that space, don't they?
Yeah.
If you were going to give us a top tip for a book to pick up and buy or borrow now, what would it be?
I think in terms of leadership, a natural one is Start With Why, Simon Sinek. I think that's a really powerful place to begin. He's actually creating a new book on friendship, which I'm really excited to read. So away from leadership and more towards friendship and connection, which obviously is what I'm passionate about. But I think the reason I say that is we can lose sight as charity leaders of our why without meaning to. And therefore, when contracts are being cut, the money's getting tight, you can end up spreading out into areas that isn't your why. It's not your mission without meaning to and without malice. But I think it's so important that we understand why the why is so important and focus on that, drive forward with that.
Do you know what your why is?
I think for me personally, my why is about connecting people and places so we all feel we belong. I think Together Co, we're on a journey with our why. So we are about creating connections to change lives. We've talked a lot about loneliness over the 24 years that the charity's been operating. We're now looking at different areas around social health and our why, feeding into it, how we promote social health being as important as physical and mental health.
What difference do you think that will make?
I think for me, we have focused a lot on physical health We're aware of that. Go to the gym, eat your veg. NHS is very clinical led. So again, kind of looking at the body. We're starting now to do more with mental health, which is fantastic. So you've got the body and the physical health. Then we are now talking much more about mental health and the mind, and how those two interconnect is really important. They're not separate. But one thing we keep forgetting is that we're social beings. We're social animals. And if you look at any studies in regards to well-being across the world, what is the key to the good life? What makes you thrive? So live to 100, the blue zones of the world, where
Love the blue zones.
where the most amount of people are living to 100. What is one of the key things? Family, relationships, connections, interactions.
Yeah.
And so that for me separates social health to be something very significant and very different to the physical and mental. It's about your relationship. So you've got your body, your mind, and your relationships. And we want to wave the flag for that part of our well-being because it keeps getting forgotten.
I can see why your whys are so important. What was the most important thing a parent or relative ever taught you?
So my parents are probably the kindest people I've ever met, genuinely. Both came from working class backgrounds. My mum from Ireland, my dad from England. Growing up, we didn't have a lot. But what they always taught me is you share whatever you have. And that has been instilled into me where, you know, my mum, I always joke with people that I think my mum would actually give away her last sock if that's all she ever owned in the world to someone who needed it in front of her. So that has been it for me. They've always taught me to be kind, think about others, not just yourself. And they still do it to this day. I'm always like, what have you been up to this week? And they've been helping this neighbour. My mum does cleaning for people, but she does so much more than cleaning. She becomes their friend. She becomes their advocate. She always goes beyond what she needs to do for others. And the same with my dad as well. He was a leader. He used to run radio stations across the UK. And I kind of looked up to him as a really kind leader that he was over the years.
There is something, isn't there, about don't say it, just do it. So if you've just seen it, that is ultimately the thing that you take away.
Yeah.
You don't need to be told to be kind. I've tried that.
Yeah.
I have children.
Yeah.
I've tried to tell them, be kind, be kind, be kind. But it's when they witness it and say things like, oh, Daddy's really kind, isn't he? Daddy's got a big heart, that you realise this is now working.
Yeah.
It's, it's not intentional. It's just that they do what they see. People will do what they see. And that's true, isn't it, in a leadership role, that you are constantly role modelling behaviour, constantly have a mirror up, because whatever you're doing filters down across teams or the people you come into contact with. So it's a big one, isn't it? Kindness.
It really is. And actually, we reviewed our values as an organisation about a year ago together because we wanted our values not to be these big, lofty words. So kindness was one. But actually, what behaviour do you see from that? What is it we want to be with each other? And it's interesting now because we have these and we've all done it together, we can be challenged on them sometimes to say, when you did this the other day, you may not have meant to, but it made me feel like this. And for us, obviously, kindness is important. Autonomy is very important. We treat people as adults. And it's a really good way then actually to kind of sense check, show the behaviour. What does that mean? And I think culture is built from a series of small actions and behaviours every day in an organisation. And the leader has to show that each and every day as well, which is tough sometimes when you're under pressure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm thinking about your team, but I'm also thinking about your parents. Have they had the opportunity to see you in this role?
So they have seen me on TV.
Okay.
So I managed to get onto Good Morning Britain.
Wow.
We're about to put on our first gala and I've invited them. So they're not going to see me fully in the role, but they're going to see, some aspect of what I do, and that will be lovely. But all of my roles, I think this is the one they most understand, but all of my leadership roles, I used to have to kind of write down for them what I did because, they're in Dorset, I was up in London or in Brighton. I think it's quite hard to understand the kind of world I was operating in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure they're very proud. How important has failure been for you?
I actually was really scared to fail. So I think that's why it's important to start with this. a perfectionist, massive fear of failure, absolutely stemming from not feeling good enough. And something I still think I'm working on. I'm not like, oh, I feel totally good enough all the time. But what's interesting is from the work I do, I do feel more confident in my work persona than I do often in my personal persona. So I think that has come from a series of failures in my work and it all being okay. When I reflect on that and actually think about what is it to fail, it's kind of hard to unpick them because what is failure? So an example, I took a role because I was going to get more salary and it was a bigger role. But deep down, I knew that it wasn't the right time and I still did it. It actually left me quite unwell doing that role because it was, well, you know, when you're out of your comfort zone so far, so much, dealing with a lot of vicarious trauma. It was running a big hostel in the centre of London. Was that failure? I mean, because I actually went to my company and said, I resign. I actually can't do this. But they actually put me into a different role. So it was fine. It was always, and is that failure? Or, you know, in my personal life, I have had some really toxic relationships, one of which I stayed in far too long. But again, is that failure? Because I think for me, what I'm starting to learn is try to just do something. And if it goes wrong, it's okay. That's the first thing. And I'm still trying to do that. I'm still like, oh, I don't want to fail. I don't want to let together go down. But I'm really trying to unpick that. But also, anything that has gone wrong has made me who I am and where I am. So I'm actually like, oh, I don't want to redo all of that. So I'm still grappling with it. Failure is big. It's a big word. It's a big thing to explore. Very linked into perfectionism as well.
If you could just delete that experience, that hard experience, would you choose to delete it or would you think that it has played some role? And it sounds like perhaps sometimes, although it could be defined as a failure, you'd actually keep it in your life story.
Yes. Yes. I think most things I would keep in my life story. The loss of a couple of close friends, no, absolutely, I'd rather they were back. But the things, particularly in work, you know, it's kind of zooming out and looking at the bigger, it's work. So yeah, I think that I would say keep the failures. But I also am compassionate to myself. I have to say as well, it's like I did the best I could with the resources I had, but that can be really hard going.
It's like you say, it's a huge responsibility. We're
Massive.
not, you know, we're not selling notebooks here, are we?
No.
We have huge responsibilities and we can only do what we can do within the circumstances that we're doing those things. It's having that compassion is the thing that allows you to continue doing the great work that you are doing.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And resilience. So nowadays, in the role, I'm not as responsible for life or death situations. So when things get really bad, it is still stressful. No one's died. And people can laugh. And I'm like, well, no, really. So sometimes that has been my reality. So we're okay.
Yeah,
today.
you've got that perspective. You've got that incredible perspective. You touched on your work persona. Tell me about your work persona, April.
So I think she is more confident. I think she knows kind of her role and her place more. I think you can kind of put that on. And I think that's interesting with leadership roles, or even like, you know, the title chief exec or CEO. And without meaning to, that can give you a level of power, which I think you have to be really mindful of as well. But it gives me that confidence to be like, okay, I've got this, I can do it. And then outside of work, it's not that I'm complete opposite, but I would say, yeah, just finding out who I am, what I love, hobbies, because work is so busy and can take over your life quite a bit in all roles, but I'm particularly finding the CEO role, you can kind of lose yourself a bit. So I think that's where sometimes there's a bit of a struggle for me.
So is the work persona more helpful than not, or does it sometimes become another thing to manage? Because I was concerned that it's a mask, or is it a helpful tool?
Yes, I think for me, what's good is because of the role I do, and I'm so passionate about our mission, I don't feel like it has to be a mask, which is good. It is who I am. It's just a more confident version of me. What it can do is make me busy over here. And so I don't focus on some of the personal things I've wanted to work on, improve. And it becomes a bit of an excuse. Oh, but I've been really busy. I've been out networking all these days, moving my body more. You know, I used to do a lot more in terms of yoga and swimming, but I'm always too busy. So it's that is how I find it can kind of become an excuse to not look at other aspects of your life.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Was there one significant moment that led you to Together Co? Or were there many?
So there is a big moment where I realised the interconnection of social health and mental health and physical health in some respects, but particularly those two. That started my passion, is a strange word, passion for loneliness. It doesn't sound quite right. I was in my 20s. I had moved up to London with an ex-partner and I was working my way up in the charity sector, working really hard, working in really difficult situations. And that relationship actually was quite abusive. And I eventually left. Took a couple of times, but I left. And suddenly I'm in London on my own in house shares. And I moved quite a lot during that time with house shares, going to work, but I was the leader at work. So I didn't have like a team, because I do also think there has to be a distinction between, you're not friends. There is a professionalism there of, you know, you're not part of the team fully. You can be, but not fully. So that was quite hard in a house share in London. My friends were scattered all across the UK and actually the world by this point. So I had some weekends where I'd go home and I'd been really busy at work and I'd go to my house share and they're all out or gone away for the weekend, and I would actually not have a conversation with anybody all weekend, or I'd try and phone my family who are in Dorset and I'd actually go and get my nails done to have a conversation with another human being. On top of that, my best friend died suddenly at 24. So I also was grieving. I think it was so hard to grieve without a community. Eventually, within a few months, that led to me becoming agoraphobic, which for people that don't know about agoraphobia means you find it really hard to leave the house. And I was highly anxious when I'd leave the house. I still went and managed hostels during this whole period, which is crazy when I look back now. And, you know, I wish I'd been more compassionate when I look back at younger April. But coming out of that, I started to realise I don't feel like I belong in London. I haven't got a community here. And the biggest move for me was going to Brighton, where I had some friends. Also, being by the sea, I realised was really important. And my recovery from all those awful situations began when I knew that I needed to be somewhere where I felt connected and where I knew I needed closer relationships. The biggest thing is now I can talk about my loneliness. And I was actually invited to join the World Health Organizational Lived Experience panel last week. If you look at social media of me at that time or look at my career at that time, I was flying through the career directory in the charity sector, you know, but I was really unwell and really unhappy. And it's because I was lonely. And that's what I then realised. Loneliness, it's a physical thing. It really hurts you. It really impacts you. It affects your mental health, yet we're not talking about it. And so that was a significant moment around loneliness, which, of course, now I'm the CEO of a loneliness charity, is very interconnected, because also then I went on to manage mental health care homes, other homelessness provision. And all I started to see around me was that people just want to belong. You know, wherever we are, whatever situation, we just want to be seen, be heard and valued. And that's kind of where I really started to become more aware of the need for social health.
Oh, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because people just don't associate loneliness with young people.
No.
We have begun to understand how older people might feel loneliness.
Yeah.
But as you say, especially now where we portray ourselves on social media in the best possible light,
Yes.
so difficult to admit I'm lonely, because it could feel, I imagine, a little bit like, I don't want to use the word failure again, but it could feel like, you know, in some way I haven't been able to form friendships, or I haven't been able to find a common place where other people with my interests are, you know, whatever it is, the onus can feel quite a lot on yourself, can't it? Which is hard at that age, because you're still young in your early 20s, aren't you? It's so informative, isn't it, for how the rest of your life goes.
Interestingly, what the World Health are noticing is that loneliness is increasing in younger people, 18 to 29, much more so now than in older people, 60 plus. So it really is significant of our time now. But I think it has to start with people being willing to share that, you know, I'm lonely, I have been lonely, you know, all those kind of stories, I will be lonely.
Yeah.
it is a universal experience that unfortunately most of us are going to experience in our lives, but also for people not to feel like there's something wrong with me. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. It's completely normal to feel lonely, like it is to feel thirsty. And when people say, oh yeah, really struggling with my mental health, I'm going to work on that, do some mindfulness. We're not saying the same about social health or our relationships. And that's where I want to see the shift happen.
I think you've answered the next question, which was why Together Co?
Yes.
But was there anything else you'd add to that?
So I also would add to that I had no plans to be a CEO whatsoever. Early career, it was kind of go up, go up, go up. I wanted to be a team leader, a contract manager, an ops manager. And it was all about the title, if I'm honest, and growing up into that. And then in the pandemic, I was in a senior manager role in a homelessness charity. And I kind of went, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if I'm on the right ladder.
Yeah.
And so I decided to leave and do a master's in positive psychology and coaching psychology and take on a project management job for another large charity in Sussex, but no line management for the first time in my whole career. There was no plan to be a CEO, but then 2 people on LinkedIn sent me Together Co. And suddenly it was this amazing loneliness charity, and there's not many of them in the country, really quite few. To have one in Brighton blew me away. And the role looked so interesting and I felt I could really make a difference. And I thought, do you know what, I'll apply and I won't get it. Obviously, then I did get it. And so it completely changed, what I'm doing and the focus. But the plan was never to be a CEO.
But it sounds like you were motivated to keep working hard in each role.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in the title.
Yes. And just keep learning.
Yeah.
Just learning all the time, doing different things.
What is it like in a leadership role at a charity? Paint a picture for us.
So I think I just said, it's all I've ever known. So I left university in Brighton. So that was my connection to Brighton. And it was during the recession of 2008, 2009. And I originally was wanting to go into probation, police, prison, and all of their graduate schemes had closed. So I was really disappointed. I came across a graduate scheme in the charity sector with Look Ahead Care and Support, which is in London, quite big charitable housing association. So off I went, and the programme is you go into a particular area, homelessness, mental health, young people, and you train within that area. So I went into a 170-bed hostel in Aldgate. And so I was training there as a support worker, whilst alongside that you train to be a leader. So you're on their fast track leadership programme. Within 6 months of going there and my career, I got my first team leader role. What is it to be a leader in the charity sector? I think really is varied, because I've worked for big charities and I now lead small charity. I think the important thing is to be aware of the level of vicarious trauma people can be experiencing because charities, they're filling in the gaps of our society that, things aren't working in communities or for people or for animals or for planet. So there's a lot of caring people, but that can really take a burden on people. So it's that, emotional toll. So as a leader, you have to be aware of that. You have to be thinking and looking after your staff. But you have to be aware of that for yourself as well. So I think that's really key as a charity sector leader, is to have that awareness. Also, I think what's really fun as a charity sector leader is when I look at my colleagues in the public sector, working at local authorities, it's amazing. Just want to say, not saying anything about it, but the charity sector, you're a bit freer. There's a lot less red tape. So you can do some really innovative, amazing things. If you just galvanise people together around a mission or a cause, you can really affect a massive change. And that's something I feel really excited by, and why I'm so passionate to get more amazing talent into our sector. Because yes, it isn't the highest paid sector and it is really tough, but the difference you can make every day, every year, the legacy you can then leave behind is incredible. And I think that's what's so special about our sector.
What's been your highlight thus far?
Oh my gosh. So when I worked in West Sussex, a developer gifted us a building.
Wow.
In West Sussex. Everyone questioned this developer, like, oh, he's going to, get this special deal. And it genuinely came from a good place. His father was founder of the homeless charity that I was working for. And we got to open the first harm minimisation hostel in West Sussex, which by that means people don't have to be sober to enter through the doors, because a lot of the services at the time in West Sussex were, you need to be breathalyzed at the door, you need to be, at a certain level within your addiction. That's very hard when you're on the streets. So it was a really exciting opportunity. So it opened, we only had 3 months to open it, so to get planning and so forth, but we did. And for 5 years, that supported a lot of people in the community. And we then found a new site which is still being built at the moment. I think it opens soon because I've left that role, where it will be open for about 21 people in the future as well. So yeah.
That's an amazing highlight. That must make an amazing difference to people. If you could advise your younger self about the most important skill to have in anticipation of your role now, what would that be?
So there's so many things, but the one I want to concentrate on, I think particularly for the CEO role, how to have good conversations. And by that, I mean, there's a variety of different, I feel like a leadership role, a CEO role, is having a good conversation at each point in time that can make things spin and happen or can stop things happening. When you're at a networking event, how do you really connect with somebody and, get them interested in what you're doing without overselling, without over pushing, but also a really key thing, how to have good, difficult conversations. They can be done well. And I think that's really important as well, to really build that open and trusting environment where it's not all great and amazing, but there is a few ways I've learned from, leadership courses, but also amazing managers that I've had, of how to hold a really safe space and have those difficult conversations that still upholds that person's dignity. Unfortunately, I've had to make people redundant. Unfortunately, I've had to deal with performance issues and disciplinaries, but you still treat that person as a human. And actually, the way you can do that and step through that can lead to a really good outcome for both parties. That's the key thing, I think. The skills is the conversation.
Not easy.
No.
That's not easy at all.
No.
So you said you learnt that through leadership courses, other managers?
Yes, and doing it.
And doing it. Yeah.
And absolutely doing it.
What kind of leader do you want to be?
I think one that never stops learning. For me, that's the most important thing. Challenge always what I think I know. Sometimes I'm like, we're doing this and it's this way, but it's that constant, where did you get that information from? What other people could you bring in? What book could you read?
Yeah.
What course could you go on? What more do you need to know? And I think that's the thing, is just to stay curious and always learning. There's not an end point where it's like, you are now a leader. What is that? We're all leaders in different aspects of our lives. So I think that's really important, is just continuously learning, challenging myself. And I think that's the way that you can build that environment in an organisation which will allow for innovation. And, in charities, they're dealing with big whys, big missions. So we've got to keep curious and we've got to keep rethinking and relearning, but making sure you're listening. That's a key thing, I think. Listen much more than being the one to say as well.
Do you think these skills are particularly female skills, or do you feel that anybody can do this? But we're holding a conversation about women and women chief executives, and so many of the things you're talking about, listening, holding good conversations, kindness, might naturally play into some of those nurturing skills and qualities that women have. Do you think that's fair, or do you think that's overstating the differences?
No, I think there is always a generalisation on gendered roles. I think it's what the world is putting out there as to what is good leadership. That's what's important. We've got the social media, we've got the key people of influence. They need to show and demonstrate what good leadership is and what we need in this world. And I think we do need a lot more of the feminine traits to improve this world. The listening, the kindness, which the feminine can be connected with. I think the important thing as a female charity leader for me is, one thing I didn't realise in my early 20s is how there will be some challenges with being a female.
Tell us about those.
So I have had roles where I'm on a senior team. That senior team was majority older males, so they would be in their 50s, 60s, older white males, I should say. And there was 2 other women with myself. there was a full review of pay and all the females got paid less than the males. And there was no justification for that. So I think there's a lot of unconscious bias. There has been many a time I have given an idea or I've led on something and then it's been attributed to my male colleagues. In my 20s, I had, have been out in work environments, a couple of drinks, and I've had male leaders who have touched my leg under the table. Yes, so there's a lot of different things. Or I've been in a room and I never forget, like, local councillors came in and shook all of the men's hands, but didn't shake mine. And the director of communities for that council, who was a female, they left the room, and instead of leaving it, they came back in and were like, "Oh, sorry, we don't want to be accused of anything," and shook both our hands.
Oh gosh.
Times where people have thought when I went with my old boss, who was CEO, that I was his PA. So asked me to take pictures and so forth. I mean, I could go on, but
how do you deal with those situations, April? How do you manage it?
So it made me really angry. It's part of why I also took a step away from senior leadership for a while, because I was fed up, if I'm honest. But now I try and sit with it, because there's so much that as a woman you have to contend with. Like, even the other day I was doing a networking event and I was being interviewed like this for 45 minutes, and I get up and go into the networking event. Now, the trouble is, when there's alcohol around, this is when it's not good as well. And a couple of males approached me, were talking away, and I had like a top with patterns on like yours, but I had writing across it. And one of the guys was reading the writing and they went, "Oh, sorry, don't want to seem like I'm looking at your breasts." And you're kind of like, I've literally just spoken about being a feminist leader, been up on stage for 45 minutes, and that's what,
Yeah.
So you can get really angry and really cross. But what I will say as well, and I think it's important, I am also white. I'm also able-bodied. I'm also cisgender. So I think there is a part that is tough, but there is a part where I really want to kind of do the work to learn how to challenge, but I also want to be a good ally as well. So I think that's where I'm at the moment in my learning. Is I now am